Well, I lost my phone. I don't know what the fuck it is. Pardon my French. I'm not feeling all that great. Been frigging around with shit all day after my work. No time for anything, really. Couldn't do anything I wanted to do. I gotta fix this. Test, one, two. Hello? 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 Alright, that sounds good. Anyway, let me just crank some stuff up here. Well, that doesn't really get cranked because I'm not gonna hear nothing. Maybe this gets cranked a little. I'll have to deal with my coughing spells. When I cough, I'll just have to freaking turn off the mic. I'm not sick or nothing. It's just a stupid dry hack cough. I think I got it from my job. So I couldn't find my phone, and thusly I'm not able to change the title. But it's pretty much basically the same. Except in reality, this is what I would call my London system. This would be my London system, not that of how do I move this here? Not that of the London system of the actual theory, because actually in all reality I don't know what the London system theory talks about. Some different things that I don't actually how can I say it? Like follow? I mean, I think that theory is probably pretty reasonable. Before we get into the actual game, we're going to talk about this Benoni system. Now, if black plays, we're going to make an assumption that most players know the algebraic notation system. They know D6. They know what D6 is. They know what G6 is. They know what E4 is. D4, pawn to king 4, that, etc. And I noticed that if I use this dark mode, it causes a problem because it shows the wrong pieces and it's blaringly white. I wonder if I can ooh, there's the nightlight setting. It's a lot easier on the eyes. I guess it's pretty good. Yeah, that's almost like nightlight, huh? Wait, does that even show up on this? Oh, look at my. It doesn't show up on the stream. No, my video's washed out. I'm gonna see if I can fix a few things here. You have to bear with me. This is 365chess.com/opening.php. And if we scroll down to the bottom, well, actually, let's play. We can even search positions. But we're going to play d4. and then you'll see um, the openings. So here we have a classical Benoni which plays bishop to g5, but how is white going to play the bishop out there if black plays c6? c5, I mean. You know? What if we hit this? Now, here's the problem. In this position, we have our drink. Salute. And we can actually play this on this little board. So, when black plays knight f6, we don't really know exactly what black's intentions are. I don't play this pawn up here. So can I do something different to throw black off? Can I play knight? Oh, you see what happened here? No. Alright, so let's close the window. We had this move, this move, I forgot what the hell it was now. I thought there was a pawn exchange. Oh. It's e6 on the third move. Now see if white would really need to put a knight there where that pawn is. But instead he puts the pawn there with this exchange. This is really crazy because I've never played this before, and my general, well, actually, if we go back to the here and we look at the position, white's traded off a pawn, you know, maybe, and nothing can attack that pawn up there. So here, 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 here. So we're kind of memorizing a pattern here, aren't we? Normally I don't play that C pawn. Normally I don't play that C pawn. So black is opting to bring out the dark bishop with a fianchetto for black. Now at the beginning, at the point where black plays c5, and still for the most part you can see that white's game is mostly 45%. It's in the 40s for winning. Now here, we've got these Benoni variations. And you can see if I move my fat head out of the way, where white has 46% playing f4, knight f3, bishop to d3, even h3. 50% of games, knight from g to e2. 251 games. Bishop c4 is not so good. We could play this line in Fritz and see what transpires compared to the actual games. What does f4 do? If black plays a6, white's getting a better advantage. If black plays knight from b to d7, now all of a sudden that percentage has gone down to 33%. Knight from f to d7, not so good. a6, not so good. Queen to e7, not so good. Bishop to g7. White responds with bishop to d3. Why the fuck is it bringing this up? Is this the game? Oh, it goes to the game, I guess. It brings up the game. I can't move that, but that's okay. It should show up. So this was played sometime in 2003. So now you're each side's developing a strategy, a reasoning for the strategy. This little war is going on. I'm tired. I had to go to sleep early tonight. Now see here, bishop decides to take the knight, which is really kind of dumb because the board's becoming open. If you're going to trade anything, you got to trade your bishops. And I would say that I don't understand the relevance of that pawn push. So here's where we come to the situation of a Benoni position and the bishops. We're talking about the bishops. Black is, for the most part, has a bad bishop. It's the light squared ones. Because you want to have the bishop that takes your opponent's pawns on the dark squares. So that's the dark squared bishop is black's good bishop. Our bishop is also, the dark squared bishop is also the good bishop. This is leading to a drawn position because white's pawns are going to end up on white squares. Black's pawns well, black's dark bishop could end up being bad. You could make an assumption that black later on in the game pushes his pawns onto the dark squares, but then there's the problem with the light squared bishop. So if the intent is to push pawns on light squares and white wants to get rid of the light squared bishop, it's got to be done early in the game. And black's going to counter with the knight. My idea would be to push the bishop back onto the light squares and then just bring them pawns back up on the light squares. I'm freaking tired. So white wouldn't want to play this bishop to g5, and white's going to need to keep the bishop back and play the light squared bishop early. So remember that strategy. Let's go. E6 is 42%. Queen to A5 check is really good for white. In what way? Okay, that's a basic guard. So there's a drawn game with bishop to g6. or bishop to g7, fianchettoing the bishop. A one game by white if white plays e6. Wait, if I can miss. And your opponents are going to know these games. I don't like this position for white, but white eventually won though, but why? I'm tired. I don't even see what's going on. A lot of that stuff is tactical play. You can't really analyze the game that much. Now look at the board. White's lost his light squared bishop. White lost both the bishops. Because white decided to take that knight with the bishop. Regardless if it's a one game or not. And I'm just doing this in my sleep now. So the general consensus is to leave the dark squared bishop back. So this modern Benoni, I think white puts the white bishop on g2, fianchettoing the bishop, making play for the center of the board. So we have to get around the light squared bishop. That was a blur. I swear to God, I'm so tired. I want to go back. I want to do, if I can stay awake long enough. Benoni classical. There's Dutch. The Dutch is part of the London system. Dutch defense. Let me just breeze through this really quick. Here white plays f4. My typical fashion is to play all the pawns on the dark squares in that game, but I don't know. Let's take a look. White is still quite a ways above. Well, actually, it's kind of even, 36% on both sides. H4, F3, knight BD2. Bishop to G5. I guess we look at that one, because I don't know if that's... Let's see here. That's the Dutch Bishop G5 variation. So... if black plays b6, now why is black having such a good odds there? I think because white made a mistake with knight to f3 and then c4. Regardless of those moves, I'm thinking in terms of the bishops, the good bishops and the bad bishops. That's how we're doing this. So we'll do... Now e3 is... Oh, the bishop's already out, okay. Also, black wants to fee and shadow the bishop before white has a chance to. Black has a win with c3. The dark bishops went down. White decides to advance with h4. Am I hitting it? Falling asleep. What happened here? Why doesn't white take the pawn back? Why is white grabs that pawn with the queen? I'd be taking the pass pawn. Okay, so here you'd want to connect the pawns, which was done correctly. See that pass pawn's getting strength. Uh-oh, that was a blunder? Black takes, advances. That was a blunder, wasn't it? How the fuck the queen gets that? I'm so fucking tired. So, white has the recapture. It wasn't a blunder. But why did white put that knight out there? Now, white's got the best pieces on the board. Knight, pawn, and queen. The queen and knight work good together. And what the hell's going on here? Queen check. Yeah, I don't know. But we're looking at pawns on dark squares. So white would need to keep the light squared bishop on the board, which is down there. What happened here? Oh, there is a blunder. There was a blunder. Wait, is that a free bishop? Yep, it's a free bishop. There was a blunder in that game. So there's a tactical problems in that game. White plays knight f3. d6, 2 games. Both of them are wins. Bishop to b5 check. I'm too tired to do this. Well, this position is similar to, like, we'd have to look for transposition to the Trompowsky and the Tory if black played f4. See, this is where it's sort of a rabbit hole, but not really, because when I studied the London system years ago, the Tory and the Trompowsky came up. Bishop to g5 came up. And white looks pretty good here. Let's see. So aside from f4, let's just get down to this main line here. Let's do this one. Now we've got the old Benoni defense. White doesn't do so good with e3 or c3. Knight f3, decapture is not good. That e captures that pawn. I've heard some other people say that that's not the best thing to do. So I'm in agreement. That's called part of the theory. Now, someone said you couldn't play bishop to g5. 11 games with bishop to f4. They were mostly drawn, and black won some games. Two games were won by black. One was drawn and one was won. If black captures that pawn. Those odds are not acceptable. White did win this game by playing... No, black played g6. So what happens to that dark squared bishop? Now white played knight to c3. That's not my deal. Usually I play white c4. We're kind of looking at a Londonish transposition. Now there's that pawn. Right now it's isolated. Wait, what the hell? Why couldn't black take that pawn right now? Is that taking it back? What am I missing? Doesn't exchange. Yeah. So why can't black take the pawn right here? He's got two attackers. White only has one defender on it. That was a blunder. That was a blunder pushing the pawn because white's got two pieces on that square. Black only has one. There goes the bishop to hell. Why did the queen take the knight? Is that mate? I'm so fucking tired. Wait, why capture? Oh, the rook. That's mate. It is mate. Tired. Fucking tired. So if you go back to the old Benoni, there's A43, and that's as far as we get. So if we look at the games, White's playing D5. White advances for the most part. That's what you're supposed to do. There's E5. Why not capture in passing? That would be E6. There's no games. Black is doing a little better with 6 drawn games if that pawn is taken. White's better. E5. Knight F. That's black. D. Jeez, I'm too fucking tired. Again, this is the old defense. What I'm looking for. This is +1. If black plays E5, Knight F6, D6. See, white plays the C4 business. So let's do that. Knight F6. E6. Why is this +1 down here? Knight A6. And black's got 60%. I think those are just, there's not enough games there. '63 with B5. I wonder what that line is. White takes that pawn. White takes the pawn or E4. A6. Most of the games are saying capturing the pawn. Why not? Bishop captures. Knight c3. I wonder if this one's... That one's in there. I don't like this game. I wonder if that can be avoided. What if white plays b3? That's not even in there. That's a weird move. I was trying to find. I mean, it looks to me like the old defense. None of this has white as playing this fianchettoed light squared bishop. Where the heck is it? I thought it was in here. I'm tired. At least I'm not coughing. Classical, 4 pawns. Benoni, fianchetto, knight beats. Blah, blah, blah. It's not in here. Well, I'll tell you what let's do. Let's go watch these videos and see. They're not too long. Yeah, sorry about that. I gotta turn my audio down.
Welcome back to chessopenings.com. Today's video is all about the Benoni defense, which is an aggressive counter response to the queen's pawn opening. It begins with the moves d4, knight f6, c4, and c5. Black's idea in the Benoni is to lure the white pawns forward in order to set up counterplay against the center and the weakened dark squares. Let's take a look. With the opening setup, d4, knight f6, and c4, white has followed one of the major principles of the opening, which is to occupy the center with pawns. This guarantees that he'll have a somewhat easier time finding strong squares for his pieces. In theory, white would like to get all of his pieces out to comfortable locations, and then gradually he wants to prepare the long-term advance of his central pawns. In the Benoni, Black's countermeasure, pawn to c5, is designed to kind of disrupt this picture-perfect scenario for white by forcing white to somehow change the situation in the center. The first point about this position is that Black is threatening to trade a flank pawn for a central pawn, and it's not really in white's interest to do this. For example, he doesn't really want to capture on c5. If he were to capture on c5, it is true that Black could recapture the pawn, say with queen to a5 check, but this would leave the queen vulnerable later in the game. Instead, what Black would do is he would simply play e6, and it turns out that in this position there's no good way for white to hold on to the c-pawn. For if he plays bishop to e3, he'll quickly run into the move knight a6, and there's no great ways to continue protecting the pawn.
We know all of this.
And if he were to try the move b4, he would run into the move a5, when again he'll find it impossible to hold on, and then eventually bring it all the way to e5. This is a very important point. If he could bring the pawn to d5. And this is actually a pleasing situation for white, because he builds upon his space advantage and cramps Black's position nicely. Now, if white could eventually bring his e-pawn out to support this pawn and then eventually bring it all the way to e5, this is a very important point. If he could bring this e-pawn up and allow it to march abreast with the d-pawn, this position would leave black off in an extremely bad way.
So
it's this struggle
E6.
for control over the e5 square, which tends to be a huge part of the early opening and middle game struggle in the Benoni opening. So white's strategic plan in this position is fairly clear. However, we have yet to talk about what are black's main ideas in this position. Since he's fixed the white pawns into a pawn chain here, black's idea is to try to rapidly break down this pawn center through pawn breaks. And one way to go about this, the most aggressive way in fact, would be the immediate b5, and this leads to the well-known Benko gambit. In this opening, black is willing to sacrifice a pawn in order to generate long-term pressure both on the queen side and against the center by breaking down this pawn chain. But we're not going to look at that today, since the more Benoni-ish handling of this position is to play e6 first. In fact, the move b5 will still end up being very strategically important later in the game, but first, white plays e6. And the idea is that after the normal move knight c3,
White didn't play e6,
pawn
you
takes
idiot.
pawn,
Black played
pawn
e6.
takes pawn, and now black
Let's
plays
just go over this
d6,
again.
preventing white
Listen to this guy
later
again.
in the game. But first, white plays e6. And the
No,
idea is that
white
after the
didn't
normal
play
move,
e6.
Knight c3, pawn takes pawn,
Dumbass.
pawn takes pawn, and now
Wait.
black plays d6, preventing
Well,
white from
I mean,
achieving.
honestly, I really don't care, because if instructors and people that describe these things, I've already seen this stuff in some other videos. But the problem that I've got right now is I'm not doing. I'm supposed to be doing this video. So he's not being appropriate in his. He's not being exact. You don't see white played e6.
d5 to d6 himself. And the idea is that after important later in the game, but first white plays e6.
No,
and the idea is that
black
after the
played
normal move
e6.
knight c3, pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, and now black plays d6, preventing white from achieving d5 to d6 himself. A very interesting strategic position arises, which is very imbalanced. White still has a big space advantage, but black has opened the e-file in this position, and he's also created conditions for an expansion on the queen side with moves like a6 and once again this move pawn to b5. Another key factor here is that black is swiftly going to fianchetto his bishop to the open diagonal. He's going to play at some point here g6 and bishop g7 on this open diagonal, and notice that he's cleverly already set it up that white has put his pawns on light squares. This is part of the point of playing c5, so that this diagonal is open, and this is going to be very annoying for white a little bit later in the position. On the other hand, though, we shouldn't forget that, of course, it is white's move in this position, and white still has a big space advantage, and his major goal of achieving e2 to e4 and then to e5 is still a very strong plan in this position. White generally continues here e4. He can also play knight f3 instead. Now, black continues his development with the move pawn to g6. And at this moment, there are quite a few different setups white can try, but for today, I just want to talk about white's most aggressive option here, and that is the popular move pawn to f4. Now, with f2 to f4, white is setting up for his big dream of playing e4 to e5. And in an ideal world, he'd do this with as much preparation as possible. He'd like to bring out the knight to f3, find somewhere to stick this bishop on f1, castle kingside, and then push for this breakthrough e4 to e5, and this would probably spell the end of black's position if this all panned out so nicely for white. However, there's always these typical drawbacks in chess to moving the pawns too early in the game. And here we see two big drawbacks. First of all, white has played so many pawn moves that he's falling behind a little bit in development, and black can make use of this factor. A second point is that we've temporarily weakened the e-pawn. It can no longer be supported with the move f2 to f3, since we've launched the pawn all the way to f4. And this weakness also requires some observation by white, and it's these factors that black is hoping to make use of during the struggle which is ahead. So, what should black do here? Well, in this position, believe it or not, black should simply continue his development with this move, bishop to g7. And this brings us to a very interesting moment in the position. White has two very obvious looking moves here. He's got the thrust e4 to e5, and he's also got the very principled move knight to f3. And both of these moves, they both look outstanding for white. In fact, neither of these moves offers white any real superiority whatsoever. It's against these very natural moves that I think you can get a sense of just how much venom and potential the black pieces contain in the modern Benoni. So right away, we've got to be asking ourselves, whoa, can't white just force a big advantage with this move, e4 to e5? But as we're going to see in just a second here, in fact, black simply just retreats, knight f to d7. And this poses white with a problem. White doesn't have enough development to support the advance of these pawns. e5 is now under attack 3 times by a pawn, by a bishop, by a knight. With this move knight to d7, of course, black added 2 attackers at once because he unveiled an attack with the bishop in this position. And white only has 1 defender, so he actually cannot defend the pawn. If he plays knight f3, for example, the pawn will just be lost. So really the only move to avoid losing a pawn here is to capture on d6. But in fact, this pawn will quickly become recovered by black. For example, he often simply castles kingside, knight f3, knight f6, and he'll be recovering this pawn, and in fact, white's king is just exposed in this position, and he's losing much of his space advantage since the e-pawn, which was looking so promising on its way up to e5 with clear support, in fact, it's now just going to be exchanged, and white has nothing to look forward to in this position. But the really shocking thing in this position is that the very natural move, knight f3, also does not promise white very much in this position. In fact, black once again continues his policy of just developing. He simply castles kingside. And it turns out that once again, this move e5 is just premature for white. It turns out that black plays d takes e5, f takes e5, and now the simple move knight g4, and once again, the pawns in the center are already under attack. Black has mobilized most of his pieces, and white's king is in the center. And this position turns out to be no good for white. But this sets white a problem. If he can't play e4 to e5 just yet, then how does he go about defending the e4 pawn, which is about to come under attack by rook e8? In fact, theory shows that in this position, black's counterattack is happening so quickly that white often needs to sacrifice a pawn in order to keep the position imbalanced and keep the position edgy, but black has excellent chances of equality in this position. I think it's this kind of position which should really strike some fear into the heart of white players, since it shows just how much potential is contained in the Benoni opening. So, does it turn out that black just has an excellent position in the Benoni after this move f4? Well, certainly what we're showing so far is that white has to be very careful. He is falling behind in development, and he needs to be very careful about how he approaches this position. But it does turn out that there is one last move here, and it's this move which gives white excellent chances of keeping the initiative, and that move is bishop to b5 check. And it turns out that this disruptive little check offers white just enough to keep this position looking very strong for him. The idea is to lure a piece to d7, and only after that does white plan to continue with the central breakthrough idea of e4 to e5. So the theory and games in this position are all highly interested, but without getting too bogged down in the details, I want to just show a couple natural moves here. After bishop d7, white gets exactly what he wants. He finally has an opportunity to play e4 to e5 under the right conditions. And this is because the knight no longer can retreat to this square, harassing the e5 pawn, nor can it come out to g4 because the bishop is now pinned. So if the knight came to g4, we would simply capture it and we'd just be up a piece in this position. So it's because of this fact that suddenly e5 becomes possible. And there's some very interesting lines in here which are worth taking a look at. Also, the more natural looking knight b to d7, that's probably the most natural looking move. Once again, e4 to e5. And once again, this knight is lacking the squares where it could put pressure on e5. If it comes to g4, it's once again just hanging. And the d7 square is unavailable. So again, this trick has succeeded. So it turns out that instead, Black's best move in this position is the counterintuitive move knight f to d7. And again, if Black doesn't know this move, he'll actually find himself in a lot of trouble. Now, in this position, what Black would like to do as quickly as possible, he'd like to harass this bishop with a6, and then to use the extra time to play b5, probably b4, trying to undermine this e4 pawn. So White throws in another very tricky move here. He plays a4, an excellent move. And this ensures that if Black does play a6, as he usually does not in this position, once we retreat this bishop, Black isn't ready to continue his expansion with b5 because we have set up a pawn on a4. So instead in this position, Black normally keeps his options open. He simply castles kingside. But now after knight f3, an interesting position is reached, which does appear to favor White. In this position, White is still highly interested in developing an attack either with e4 to e5, or in many games you actually see a kingside pawn storm which begins with the moves f4 to f5. And this position, it's quite tricky for Black to develop his counterplay on the queen side. But both sides have quite good chances in this position if they're willing to do a little bit of homework. That's it for today. We've gone move by move and clarified some of the important ideas which characterize the modern Benoni. We've looked at how Black plans to situate his pieces and what he's basing his counterplay on. At the same time, we've looked through a few variations and we've begun to understand what are White's key ideas and how he plans to hassle Black and threaten him in the modern Benoni. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again.
I fell. I fucking fell asleep. God damn it. This is like a fucking hour.
Had a lot of troubles with.
Several plans here, but first let's talk about what it is that Black wants to do. Black has a lot more space on the queen side, so that's where he'll be focusing all of it, and I think that's just the best move. But let's just have a look real quick at what happens if we take with the pawn. Okay, they should obviously take back. The knight is still attacked.
Knight moves
And
back.
after we retreat, we're attacking e5 twice. You could defend it once, but that's not going to save you. So White already has to sort of mix it up and make the game a little chaotic.
Not attacking it
E6.
twice.
Okay, could be scary if this is your first time seeing this. But let's get that off the bloop window. Here you can just take.
Oh my god.
And it's always worth noting whether or not this trick with queen to h4 worked.
It's always worth noting that now you have an isolated queen pawn. White has an isolated queen pawn. What the hell?
And where White just does nothing to oppose Black's plan, that's what Black's going to be doing. Also, when this pawn went to d5, you'll notice that this diagonal was weakened.
10:30 already. Fuck.
So this bishop is almost always going to be fianchettoed. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense on e7, but okay, this diagonal, you can see it has a lot of possibilities.
Fianchetto gets in
so
behind
his plans are g6,
passed
bishop
pawns
g7,
of
and
White.
most likely he's going to castle on that side. Now White, who has more space in the center, is going to be playing on the other side of the board. He's going to be trying to play moves like e4, f4, and eventually e5. And if he gets e5 in successfully, then he's playing the game very well.
Jonathan Swartz.
Games that end really quick. There's games in the database that are less than 20 moves. Usually that means White just played e5 and the game ended immediately. So Black does have to really be careful. You are living on the edge, which is why some people are a bit suspicious of this opening. And okay, there's main ways. Today we're actually going to be looking at one of the most critical, though not most popular variations, which will be the Taimanov attack. So we're just going to look what happens if White just goes for it and tries to kill Black right out of the gate. That'll be the main focus of today. And lesson 2, we'll go over lines where they put the pawn on e4 and they play knight to f3, with or without h3 and bishop d3, these sorts of moves. That'll be in lesson 2. And in the final lecture, we'll be going over the fianchetto variation, where white doesn't even touch the e-pawn until later. He mostly tries to restrict all of black's options, and only then does he, when he's all his pieces ready to go. In the distant future, he'll play e4 and f4 and the same sorts of things. But let's just be serious on day one. Okay, e4, and after g6, we're going to fianchetto the bishop. Let's just play f4. And this already might be something that you might be kind of intimidated as black. Maybe you don't think you want to play this. So the main move here is actually just bishop g7. And you're telling white, yeah, you're not threatening e5. And we'll actually look at a few moves here. So if we get a good look at this position, this is our basic starting position. We'll show 3 different moves. And yeah, it's interesting. So what happens if he just plays the move e5? And this is the McInnes attack. So it's very difficult if it's your first time. You might be a little scared. Some audience members are apparently not scared. Some people are just laughing. Yeah, e5, you can't do that. Black actually has 2 moves, and they both should at least equalize. So this isn't a very scary threat.
Like freaking Bible study.
And the moves are taking on e5 and moving the knight that's attacked to d7. The most popular is just to move the knight, and that would be my recommendation. I think that's just the best move. But let's just have a look real quick at what happens if we take with the pawn. Okay, they should obviously take back. The knight is still attacked. And after we retreat, we're attacking e5 twice. You could defend it once, but that's not going to save you. So white already has to sort of mix it up and make the game a little chaotic with the move e6. Okay, could be scary if this is your first time seeing this.
Why does he keep saying that?
Let's get that off the window. Here you can just take. And it's always worth noting whether or not this trick with queen to h4 works. Here it doesn't. The point is you're provoking g3. And now you want to play queen to e4, but obviously the knight will take you. So you can exchange the knights with check and play queen e4. And then you can hope that you pick up the rook. But if white is careful, what should white just play here?
You can move the queen.
Yeah, queen e2. And yeah, so if you take this rook, not only does it look really bad that he's taking on d7, but it's actually mate in 10. So here you'd have to trade the queens, and then this, excursion didn't really make a whole lot of sense. So
maybe there's a trap
so
in there
back,
and he just didn't go
here we
through
take.
it.
They take back immediately. So there's actually a more forceful move that white can play.
This guy's too slow. Well, if there's a more forceful move, what the hell is it?
So here he pushes immediately, and we can take.
I don't like this guy's
some fantastic stuff, but it illustrates the key point in all of the Benoni, which is, more important than actually winning material and everything is having dynamic, active pieces and playing for the initiative. It matters a whole lot more than actually winning material, whether it's a pawn, an exchange, whatever. And this is actually fine for white. White should be happy with this variation. He takes the knight, giving up the rook.
I'm fucking dying here. Let's see what is this?
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Chess Giant. This is Solomon Riddell, and in today's video we're going to be covering the Benoni defense. We have to go after this pawn chain e6, looking to take this pawn back with have a very smooth and easy middle game. I think here the best move for white, and it's not even close, is d5. But let's answer the obvious question, guys. What happens if white just takes the pawn on c5? It appears to be a free pawn. Why not just take it? Well, this actually turns out to be a pretty big mistake because we now have e6, looking to take this pawn back with tempo, potentially putting pressure on the very vulnerable pawn on f2. White could play a move like bishop e3, trying to hold on to it, but then we just play knight a6, attacking that pawn. We're going to take that pawn off the board, and white is going to have a very cramped and uncomfortable position. A move like b4 may make it seem like white is successfully holding on to that pawn, but guys, in this position, we cannot play passive chess. We can't just sit around and admit that we're down a pawn and play moves like h6 or bishop e7. We have to go after this pawn chain right away with the move a5. And notice how a3 can't really be played because we're simply going to take that pawn on b4, and if a takes b4, thank you for the rook on a1. After a move like b takes a5, it's true. I mean, white is temporarily up 2 pawns, but let's be honest, we can take either of these pawns literally whenever we want to with tempo. And actually, in this position, I think the best move for black is knight e4, centralizing this minor piece and really threatening to play queen f6, which actually traps the rook on a1 and threatens a mate in 1 on f2. If white sees this and plays a move like bishop e3, protecting the pawn on f2, we can now just play queen takes a5 with check, and after knight d2, play knight a6. I mean, usually, guys, we don't want to bring our knight to the edge of the board, but our knight on a6 is really attacking both c5 and eyeing the square on b4. A move like bishop takes c5 will probably be our next option, and if you look at this position from the white perspective, they have a very awkward
story,
end,
don't take
both
the
e7
pawn.
and c7, but against this, we can simply play queen b6, winning a pawn because we're attacking both the pawn on d6 and the pawn on b2, and white simply can't hold on to both. If a move like d takes e6, we're not going to take with our d pawn because of queen takes d8 with check, but take towards the center of the board with f takes e6. And really, no matter what white plays the next move, let's say white plays something like g3, we're going to break through in the center of the board with d5. If c takes d5, queen takes c5 is a very good option. And if any other move here, like bishop g2, we're going to continue to push down the board. Fairly even move. Absolutely crazy on e4 and our bishop on g7.
Well,
We're
there's some
putting
good stuff in there, but I want to look at this video here. You can watch this stupid ad. Actually, those watches are pretty cool. We sell them at the store. The Versa 2 checks out. Skipped heartbeats.
In this episode, I'm going to show you Fischer's wonderful trap in the modern Benoni defense from the black perspective. The good point I like about this trap is, even though Fischer has played this game in the year 1970, and soon after that, this trap has been published in many books and articles, time to time, many higher rank opponents are falling into this trap. So if you are a modern Benoni player, then you should certainly watch out for this trap in your own tournament games. The opening arises after the following order: d4, knight to f6, c4, c5. Now white grabbed the space on the queen side with d5, and accordingly black challenged the white center with e6. After knight to c3, pawn captures, and the move d6. Yes, indeed, black has created a weakness on the d6 square, but in return, he get tremendous tactical and the sharp activity. The Fischer game continue from here onwards with a random order, so that's why, just for your understanding, I have picked the most accurate and most obvious choice from the white, which leads to the same trappy position. White plays e4, consolidating his extra space, and black plays g6. So his idea is very obvious. He wants to play bishop to g7 and put this bishop on this long diagonal where it can create some nice attacking chances. White continue with knight to f3, and now the obvious move from both the side, developing the king side bishop and then castling on the king side.
I like the bishop move.
So this is known as a classical variation of the modern Benoni.
Classical.
Okay, black continue with a6. So if allowed, then black will certainly play b5 and grab more
Black's light
space on the
squared
queen
bishop.
side.
I mean, white's light
So
squared
accordingly,
bishop's
white
looking
needs
good.
to stop it with the move a4. Now, just like other d4 openings, this light square bishop is a problematic piece in the black camp. So that's why it's very obvious that black needs to play bishop to g4, and if allowed, then exchanging this bishop with white's strong knight, or sometimes even light square bishop of the white itself.
Now see, I would have played...
Now, as per the theory, the most obvious choice of the white is
Maybe
bishop to
not.
f4, and this move is logical as well. White's simple idea is to pressurize the d6 square as quickly as possible, and one good way to achieve
White's
this
got
is
knight
to
to
play
b5.
knight to d2, knight to c4, and
No,
put
you
more
don't.
pressure on the d6 square. Here the main continuation from the black side is to play bishop captures f3, but at this position Fischer plays a very tricky move, rook to e8, which create a deadly trap. Now if you are playing this variation from the white perspective, my recommendation is you should play either knight to d2 or queen to c2, which completely avoid this trap. But as it happened, the most natural looking
h3.
move in this position is h3, which straight away leads to our famous trap. When I checked this position in online database, I found out that so far h3 has been played in 22 games, and some of the games are very recent.
Wow, black
and
is
you can see
winning.
the result over here. They are tremendous for the black. If you carefully look at this position, h3 looks the more natural reply, because once the black give up his dark square bishop, then with the bishop pair and the space in the center, white always get slight advantageous position. And yes, indeed, it's true, except there is one problem, that Fischer has unleashed one of his pet trappy line. Before I move on, I like you to pause this video and find out, as a black, how you going to continue from here onwards.
What if he takes? No. Oh, there's a rook. Rook
Well, I hope
captures.
you find this amazing blow. Bam!
Knight captures that pawn.
So suddenly from nowhere, black is a clear pawn up. And even though his light square bishop is hanging, white cannot even touch it. Now in the game, Fischer's opponent played knight captures e4, and after rook captures e4, he was clearly a pawn down and later on indeed lost the game. But we should obviously need to see what happens if your opponent captures this bishop. After all, it's a free piece and white doesn't have any major problems. Well, we reach to the second critical position of this trap. Can you identify black's next dazzling reply?
There's a dump.
Well, I hope you do and find out this second important blow. Boom! So once again, black regain his piece with extra pawn, and if white foolishly take this bishop, then there comes knight captures c3, attacking queen as well as double attack on the e2, which cannot be prevented. So the sample line can run like this: queen to d2, knight captures e2 check, king to h1, and after knight captures f4 and queen captures f4. With 13 moves in the opening, black emerged with a 2-pawn advantage, and with an accurate play, this is just required a technical performance.
Jeez.
So this is a wonderful trap exists in the classical variation of the modern Benoni defense, which you
Yeah, that's nice. So the modern Benoni. Why did he call it the modern Benoni? The bishop wasn't. The white squared bishop wasn't fianchettoed. You see, there's these grandmasters. They're not like. There's problems with that. Would be a good game to analyze in a future lesson. I could go over that video. I'd never be able to find it. So if I were to bring up the game, which is Fritz here. Let's see. So now if I bring up the game and play the move, we can see what happens here. What, c5? This is a new variation then. Oh, it's supposed to be knight f6. B5's coming up. G6. Shit, I'm just too tired. I'm too tired. I'm just too tired. I can't. You got G6, you got E6, you got D6, B5. The B5, white's supposed to capture. I thought E6 was supposed to happen. This is looking good for white. I'm messing something up somewhere. I don't know what the fuck it is. I just don't know. I can't. That trap would be a good line to go through, honestly. Unfortunately, I've got to call it quits. The whole premise behind all of this is this C5. Or what if black plays this? Then there's this. Then there's this. Then this. Now white's a little bit less. White's still ahead, but it's less. And then we've got... See, this is what I don't know what to do. I can't play white f4 because the knight would take the pawn. Oh, he's got to prepare that with his knight. Fuck. He captures. The game is saying, well, first it says 0. Now it's back up to 0.5. You know? I don't know. Knight f3. Now see, this gives, according to the engines, it's giving black a better game. Well, I think if knight f6 and then that move, you know, there's this. And then there's c4, c4, c5, d5. I don't know what to do after this, because white can't play e4 unless he brings the knight up. Oh, I know what it was. Was it this? No, it was pawn captures. That's what it was. White's still ahead here. White can play e4 now and get a good advantage. 1.5. If black takes, according to the engines in the game, if black does g6, white's a little better. If black does this, white is much better. Knight f3. Bishop e7. Where's g6 here? g6 is definitely not good. So black lost the opportunity to play that move. Actually, shit. Fuck did I do? Play c4. Black capture, and he's down to almost draw. But then after the capture, white's up to 1 point with d6. Bishop to d6 and d6. d6. Now white can play e4. That's the main line right there. It's gotta be. f4. Bishop to g7. Bishop b5 check. White's got advantages up to this point here. So then the idea is to trade the light squared bishop if that was to happen. White's got an advantage here. White has the best move here. It's this move. If knight captures, h captures, queen captures, bishop to e3. Bishop captures at c3 check. E captures at d7. And that's the end. Bishop captures at d7, queen to d3. Here. Where the fuck is the bishop captures? There's no bishop captures. I don't fucking know. I don't know. This is why we need the book. Because when you use the computer, it's calculating some stuff. It doesn't really go into the theory. Now you can see White's pawns. They're like spread all over the fucking place. White's bishops look good. It's an active game for sure. But not one that I would want to play, and it's not my design. So there's a problem we'd have to solve with this Benoni BS. And I gotta go to sleep. I got one more day to work, and I got a bunch of crap to do. White, so basically the moral of this story is that White cannot play c3. I don't know how I'll go all the way back. So if Black plays this, this is a drawn game. White's best move, well, there's knight f6. White's best move is c4. White's best move is to advance immediately. And b5 is b5 is the Bengo. And that's supposed to be good for white. I think by taking it. So black would play g6. White plays e4, knight f3. That's supposed to be d6 here. Bishop to g3 or knight f3. White's almost a whole point ahead. This might be where that trap comes in. Was there a castle? Because I don't fucking remember. That's why I'm going to stop right here. I can't do it anymore. But this position has white in the advantage right here. So it goes knight f6. c4, g6, knight c3, e6, e4. So now this is where the tactics show up. So white's plan here is to put, in my game, would be to put the pawns on light colored squares. Fianchettoing this bishop over here wouldn't be ideal because he wants to get rid of the light squared bishop early on in the game. This is the position right here with this black's fianchettoed bishop. White plays that move. Then I would have to look at that trap and see how that trap, I could write a note, text after move. Yeah, that's it. Actually, white didn't do as good with that, did he? Castles h3. Text after move. So we're gonna have to go over that Fisher trap, I guess, and try to figure out, like, what if h3? Bishop captures f3. I don't care about that. That's why I wanted to play knight b to d2. Weakens White's situation. White's still ahead though. I gotta call it quits. Not feel good. It's what it is. It's the Benoni is no baloney.